Dear participants, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening. I am Christophe Bezassier, acting as coordinator of the Forest and Landscape Restoration Mechanism within the Forestry Division in FAO. It's a great pleasure to be with you today for this event named Mapping Together. Our local leaders use open forest collectors to monitor restoration. Next, please. Before giving the floor to my colleague Carolina Gallo and other WRI experts to present the document named Mapping Together, a guide to monitoring forest and landscape restoration using collector mapathons, I just would like to give you a brief overview of the products developed recently with WRI between FAO and WRI in the context of the strong partnership we have. Building on the recommendation of the Dryland and FLR Monitoring Week organized in 2016, we launched in 2019 the Road to Restoration, a guide to identifying priorities and indicators for monitoring forest and landscape restoration. This document very useful to select relevant and cost-efficient indicators for monitoring restoration is available in English, French, Spanish. Based on this document, we are currently working also on a web application and an e-learning course to help restoration practitioners to identify monitoring indicators. We have a very good collaboration with WRI at country level in several contexts for mapping exercise, baseline studies, with identification of restoration opportunities in DRC, Guinea, Kenya. And we are leading a monitoring component of a new wiki project in support of the African Restoration Initiative, FAO-WRI, in the context of a consortium led by GIZ. Before just giving the floor to Carolina for the presentation of this document, Mapping Together, a guide to monitoring forest and landscape restoration using collectors Mapathon, I just want to confirm to you that this document will be available soon, both in French and in English. And we are going also to develop an e-learning course based on this document. Now, Carolina will give you more details on the content. So over to you, Carolina.
Thank you, Christophe. Good morning and good afternoon, everyone. As Christophe just mentioned, the guidebook we are launching here today is entitled Mapping Together, a guide to monitoring forest and landscape restoration using collectors mapathons. But you may be asking yourself, what is a mapathon? Well, I would like to clarify that just before moving forward. A mapathon is a coordinated group mapping event where participants get together to collectively and intensively collect land data for a specific area. What I will be presenting here are actually the main steps to follow for the data collection. I'm not going to get into all the details of all the steps that we have in the guidebook, but an overall idea. And I will do so in the order which they're shown in the publication. Also, I will be presenting the tools we use at each of one of the steps. Next, please. So the first step will be to prepare for the data collection. And the surveys that we normally use for that are all created with Open Forest Collect, which is a tool that provides a fast, easy, and flexible way to set up a survey for data collection. We normally design these surveys and decide which data we want to collect in consultation with national stakeholders and using always the national or landscape contexts and national land classifications as reference. With Collect, we can manage, aggregate, and consolidate data. And the surveys created can be used both for collectors in this case, or Collect Mobile in the case we'll be collecting field data. The second step, before starting the actual data collection, would be to design the sampling method. which could be either random or systematic. And for each of those, we could incorporate a stratification as well. For the sampling, you can use different GIS tools, like, for example, QGIS. You can do so through the grid generator tool in Google Earth Engine, which is normally faster, or using CPAL in the case you want to stratify the sampling. Next. Now that we have everything ready, we can pass to the data collection. And for that, we use collectors. That is the main tool that we explain in the publication. This is a tool for augmented visual interpretation. Collectors has been used in many countries for different purposes. For example, the forest reference emission levels in several countries, land degradation neutrality, mapping restoration opportunities, or monitoring restoration. It is a tool integrated as a plugin in Google Earth and gives free access to imagery from Google Earth, Big Maps, Google Earth Engine, and planet-based maps from the Norway's International Climate and Forest Initiative. Here you can see examples of each of them. In the case of Google Earth Engine, we have access directly to Landsat 7 and 8 and Sentinel-2 imagery, and graphs with the NDVI values are also displayed. Collectors also synchronizes the view of each plot geographically, so in all the images, we're always looking at the same point to facilitate the plot assessment. Next. Once the participants start collecting the data, they will answer the questions of the survey shown in a card format that appears when clicking on each of the plots, basing their land cover assessment on what they see in all the previously shown images, which also pop up automatically. Participants only need basic computer skills, which are complemented with their own local knowledge of the land and some previous guidance on how to interpret the images and graphs provided. Through collectors, they have access to historical satellite imagery, so they can go back in time and detect any changes that happened in the land since the year 2000. As mentioned before, these surveys are adapted to the context of the project, and they're also multi-purpose, so they can be used for different reporting needs. All data collected by the users are automatically and locally saved. Next. And now, how do we transform these collector data into maps? For that, we can use CPAL, which stands for System for Earth Observation Data Access, Processing and Analysis of Land Monitoring. And it's a cloud computing platform to access and process satellite data with no need of previous coding experience. With CPAL, we can combine satellite imagery with the samples taken through collectors to create land use maps. You can see here the example of the final results after a mapathon we hosted in Pakistan 1 year ago. It is possible to access to analysis-ready satellite data, including time series from Landsat and Sentinel-1 and 2. We can classify images and produce land cover and land cover change maps. CPAL also counts with tools for map accuracy assessment and stratified area estimation. And just to conclude, to conclude, I would like just to mention that all these tools are part of the FAO Open Foris initiative that started back in 2010 in the context of a project funded by Finland. The tools are all free and open source, and they provide advanced solutions to facilitate, among others, national forest inventories and national forest monitoring systems, reporting on forest reference levels and forest reference emission levels, and as we just saw during the presentation, sample-based surveys, map creation, data management, analysis and reporting, and in the context of the webinar, also to monitor restoration. And with this, I think I'm done with my time. Thank you, Wilson. Thank you, everyone, for your attention.
Hi, everyone. My name is Dow Martin, manager in the Global Restoration Initiative Monitoring Team at World Resources Institute. And we're here today because we know that growing trees, whether on farms to reforesting bare patches of land, forest and landscape restoration activities all share one common vision, making land work for people and nature. And our monitoring team strategy is aimed at answering one tough yet important question, which is how much land are people restoring? And we tackle that question from three scales, from individual tree growing projects across to landscapes and in countries to global. And today our speakers will highlight the use of Collect Earth with the examples across 3 continents. Starting with Bernadette Irakwaye. She is a research associate in the Global Restoration Initiative at World Resources Institute. She's a GIS expert on restoration monitoring in African countries and is based in Rwanda. Over to you, Bernadette.
Thanks, Dow. Okay, I want to start with an overview of the case studies that are presented in the Collect Earth guide that we are launching today. The case studies showcase the versatility of Collect Earth tool, as Carolina has mentioned, and how it can be used to inform restoration activities, including setting baselines or monitoring changes at different scales. The case studies also highlight that it is possible to involve different types of stakeholders when working with Collect Earth tool. Next. The first case study used Collect Earth for monitoring restoration in Ciron Grande watershed in El Salvador. The study area was over 100,000 hectares, and the objective of the study was to set a baseline for tree cover outside of forest using indicators on tree cover and land use, land cover change between 2011 and 2016. Different officials at the government, city, and watershed scales and observers from Honduras participated in the Mapathons. You will hear more about this case study in this webinar today. Next. The second case study was implemented in Sodoguraji Woreda in Ethiopia. The objective was monitoring tree cover change between 2010 and 2015 and progress towards the Woreda's target of 19% tree cover. The participants in the Mapathon included regional and district experts, NGO staff, and university lecturers. The key indicators monitored were the percent area of land use land cover, percent tree cover, the spatial patterns of trees, and the percentages of road, rivers, and other linear features with tree canopy. You will also hear more about this case study during this webinar. Next. The third case study was implemented in the Sidi district in India, an area close to 400,000 hectares. The objective was to understand tree cover outside of forest, tree-based restoration interventions, and to identify potential areas for increasing tree cover in the district. Participants in the Mapathon included GIS students and young professionals, as well as farmers. And the key indicators included were land use, land cover change, tree cover, tree count, and the existing tree-based restoration interventions in farmlands and associated tree species. Next. So the fourth and last case study in the guide was done in the Gatsibo district in Rwanda. The objective was to set a baseline for tree cover outside the forest against which restoration progress can be measured. The participants in the Mapathon included government extension officers, GIS teachers and students, and NGO staff. The key indicators were tree cover, tree density, land use, and land cover. And one of the findings from this case study was that the percent tree cover in the sectors inside the Gatibo district ranged between 12 and 22% in 2014. And this suggested an opportunity for more tree-based land restoration approaches where appropriate in order to reach the 30% tree cover target. Next. So using the experience acquired while working on these case studies, we are scaling up the use of Collect Earth tool for monitoring restoration. This map is showing the countries across the African continent that have made forest and landscape restoration pledges under the Bond Challenge. The same countries have also joined the African Forestry and Restoration Initiative, also known as AFR-100. As many of you know, both initiatives aim to restore degraded and deforested lands by 2030. Next. At the World Resources Institute, we are currently supporting 5 among those AFR-100 countries in the development of systems to guide restoration action on the ground and to track progress on restoration. We work with national and local stakeholders to support the development of monitoring frameworks. And these frameworks identify the relevant indicators and metrics to show where restoration is successful and where more investment is needed. We provide trainings on the use of robust and transparent approaches and tools such as Collect Earth for monitoring restoration. As an example, we have used Collect Earth tool to assess tree cover at the national scale in RWANDA and at the subnational scales in Ethiopia, Kenya, Malawi, Niger, and Cameroon. Next. So the more mapathons we did, the more participants expressed interest in learning more about Collect Earth tool so that they can gain enough skills to lead restoration monitoring in their areas of interest. So last year, we started providing in-depth trainings to our local partners on how Collect Earth can be used for monitoring tree-based restoration activities. In these trainings, we are teaching the participants everything they need to know to harness the full potential of Collect Earth tool for monitoring restoration. And we cover topics ranging from developing a data use plan and engagement strategy. We cover how to design a Collect Earth survey, how to create sampling grids, and we cover the best practices for interpreting high resolution imagery available in the free archives such as Google Earth. We also cover data validation techniques and data analysis. And finally, we overview how to present and interpret the results of Collect Earth data. So we have done these trainings in Cameroon and in Niger, and next week we'll have a similar training in Malawi. And the participants in our training sessions have also started training more individuals. And this is expanding the Collect Earth user community across Africa. Next. I want to end my presentation with some examples of how Collect Earth is helping us monitor restoration in various ecosystems on the African continent. This first example is showing land in Western Rwanda that was mainly cropland in 2006, but has since undergone natural regeneration. We can clearly see the forest in 2019. Next. Next. Okay. This second example shows a plot in a cropland in Rumfi district in Malawi. And this plot had about 6% tree cover in 2011. By 2019, the tree cover inside the plot had increased to 34%. And I want to mention this is one of the strengths of using Collect Earth tool for monitoring restoration. Many remote sensing techniques, they tend to miss trees when the trees are scattered or mixed with other land cover types, such as in this example. So with Collect Earth, we are able to clearly see these trees outside of forest. Next. In this last example, we are looking at a unique ecosystem, tiger bushes or tigre broussé in Niger. And the 2010 image shows a very degraded tiger bush and some signs of land restoration activity inside and outside our Collect Earth plot. Moving forward in 2019, the image shows more vegetation of tiger bushes. It is also showing half moons or demi-lune that are used for water retention during land restoration in Niger. So to conclude, Collect Earth tool is helping us to monitor restoration progress and is providing us with additional insights on land restoration practices in different ecosystems. Thank you for your attention.
Thanks, Bernadette, for highlighting the importance of training in Collect Earth. And now we're jumping over to El Salvador, to Giovanni Molina. He is a manager of geostatistics, risk management, and climate change at the Ministry of Environment and Natural Resources in El Salvador. Over to you, Giovanni.
Thank you. Good morning or afternoon to everyone. Thanks to WRI for inviting me to share our experience in El Salvador using Collect Earth. Next, please. Like was mentioned previously, we started with the Collect Earth doing a mapathon in 2018 with the support of WRI. We make a land use cover map of one small region of El Salvador. In this moment, we decide to use this tool to monitoring and to support all activities of, for example, of RED. Next, please. Please. Okay, we made a plot grid for the whole country. Using this grid with a 1 kilometer of distance. We have a total of 21,103 plots with 25 points per each. The period analyzed was from 2001 to 2018, divided into two periods, 2001 and 2011, and 2011 to 2018. The main objectives to do this is calculate the deforestation rate, input for the elaboration of the forest reference level, calculation of the CO2 emission, to contribute information from greenhouse gas inventories from El Salvador, and monitoring tool for restoration. Next, please. Next, please. Okay, before starting the selection process of plots that have undergone change, loss or gain in Foris and that have been interpreted in the Collect Earth online tool, the classification with their levels and land use and land cover code used in Collect Earth is detailed in this slide, like you see. This classification is in harmony with the classes used by the IPCC. The analysis was made using Collect Earth Online and Collect Earth Desktop. In the moment with parcel is classified to check in the two tools, Collect Earth Online or Collect Earth Desktop. Next, please. In the review process, also made use of a set images that the Ministry of Environment of El Salvador has. For example, we use IRS from India from the year 2000. We use a Rapid Eye 2011 and 2016. Now we have Rapid Eye 2018 and 2019, but these images will be used in the next monitoring. Aerial photography from the year 2016 for the whole country. A wall-to-wall LiDAR survey that we made in El Salvador in 2016. The LiDAR was input to check every parcel. And we use a planet images too. Next, please. Next, please. Okay. This is the design of the plots. We check it like I mentioned, 25 points per plot with the 50 meters of distance. This has served as the baseline for the construction of the forestry reference level that has been presented this year to the convention. Also to estimate ecosystem degradation. Next, please. Next, please. The visual interpretation criteria for each plot, you can see the dominant land use in each parcel, yeah, the wooded sector and the agriculture use sectors. El Salvador is a country fully fragmented, so this is more difficult to do the visual interpretation. Next. These are part of the results that we have made using different analysis. At the end, was concluded that El Salvador is we use this will be our future monitoring methodology, for example, for RED plus activities and the restoration ecosystems. Next, please. Oh, this is the results of the national reference level that I mentioned. Like you see, we have like 1 million tons of CO2 equivalent. No. Next, please. Thanks. Muchas gracias to everyone to listen, to attention.
Thank you, Giovanni. Next, unfortunately, we don't have Salalem with us. He's having issues connecting, but Tesfai Walder Mariam from WRI, who's a research associate, who's actually the first at WRI to adapt Collect Earth and use it for country focus or landscape focus planning. So I'm very excited to introduce Tesfai, who will present on the work in Ethiopia. Over to you, Tesfai.
Thank you, Dao. Hello, everybody. As Dao said, I will be presenting a little bit of overview on Ethiopian case study on behalf of Zalalem from Wandoganet Forestry College. Next, please. So Ethiopia did a commitment, really huge commitment to Bone Challenge, like 50 million hectare of restoration. But commitments need to be verified. And some of those commitments are the climate resilient green economy. And within that, they have 5-year plans, which they call it growth and transformation plans. And that's one of the 2024 plan. And then there is a recent Green Legacy campaign, which aims to plant about 20 billion trees in 4 years. They do claim achieved 8 billion already. And then they have goals, the broad goals, like rehabilitating 22.5 million hectares of degraded land, improve watershed development across 41.35 million hectares, and also achieve 20% forest cover by 2020. Next. To translate those commitments into reality on the ground, we need to have targets set and also good indicators. And some of those indicators are the land use land cover, which would indicate where the land use is at the current state and to which direction it is changing. What is the change direction? Also, tree cover percent. Is the tree cover increasing? What is the current state? And then also the number of trees on the landscape, and as well as the distribution. Are they scattered? Are they clumped? Are they in linear features? And these will be helpful indicators to associate with which land use those tree cover percents are associated. In addition to that, like in many dry degraded lands in Ethiopia, physical conservation measures are a big part of restoration. So we also assess the linear features like roads or terrace, or gullies, those kind of features. Next. Therefore, we did two mapathons, the 2010 and 2015, to compare the change. And in total, we do see about 8.6% tree cover gain. But we do also see a lot of deforestation and, of course, wooded and forest areas, because, of course, people extract trees from where they are. But a modest increase in grasslands, shrublands, settlement areas. Next. Those tree cover percentages were also mapped across the Qebelias. Qebelia is the smallest administrative unit in Ethiopia. Districts are like counties in the US case. So we have stuff in districts, but the action actually takes place in Qebelias. And this map shows where the tree cover is more and where does more to be implemented, from yellow to dark brown. Next. And in the summary, so there are the goals, the progress, and then the possible measures. This is recommendations, like for instance, catching up to the GTP2, that's the growth and transformation plan. The forest cover target is to increase to 19% from whatever current state, and the progress shows 9.5. And then recommendations are like reversing deforestation in 27 Qebelias. Those are losing forest. We saw that deforestation is going on forest and dense woodlands. Also increasing forest, high forest ecosystem service, and only 9 of the Qebelias have high forest in the areas. So change on those areas with slope more than 60% would help. And that's the prioritization. Increasing food security was another big goal, of course, and diversifying income. And 13 Qebelias had only less than 5% tree covers in rural compounds. Promoting home gardens would be a suggestion or a recommendation. Protecting water bodies. 10 Qebelias have no tree cover along water bodies. Growing trees along water bodies, lakes, and other water resources would be a recommendation. Next. And I think if somebody else is not presenting this, this is also using the collect as
Hi, Tesfai. I'm going to take over for the next 3 slides. Sorry for the command and control on that. Hi, everyone. My name is John Brandt. I'm an associate in the restoration team at WRI, and I want to spend the next 3 or 4 minutes or so introducing you to how we're combining remote Earth with collect Earth with remote sensing in order to measure restoration. So it looks like this GIF here on the right is actually not working. I would hope that that would be a nice comparison with the satellite imagery, but I guess we can leave that for later. So WRI is developing free open source data that enables the landscape scale mapping of trees outside of forests at the 10-meter scale. And this data complements collect Earth data in order to enable the spatially explicit monitoring and baselining of tree-based restoration activities. Here on the right is a 400-hectare section of Sonsonate in El Salvador. And if the GIF were working, you'd be able to see that we are able to both map trees in urban areas as well as individual trees with canopies above about 5 meters on farmland. So this data complements Collect Earth data and enables you to generate landscape scale wall-to-wall data. Next slide, please. So we utilize Collect Earth to ensure that this remotely sensed data accurately represents what's happening on the ground and reality. For instance, here on the right in Makueni County in Kenya, Collect Earth was utilized to collect half-hectare tree cover data at every single 500 meters across a subsection of the county. You can see it here overlaid with the landscape scale % tree cover at a 10-meter scale, where the background spatial data is colored from white to dark green, where darker colors represent an increase in tree cover or a higher tree cover. The plots are the squares that are spaced evenly across the map, and those are also colored in the same color scale. So what we can do is utilize this photo interpreted data to conduct accuracy assessments, next slide, that ensure that the remotely sensed data lines up with the results of a Collect Earth Mapathon. This allows the Collect Earth data to feed into the generation and validation of spatially explicit maps that can be utilized for both baselining and monitoring of project and landscape scale restoration activities. You can see on the left an example output from this validation exercise where we have the % tree cover across the landscape from the wall-to-wall remotely sensed data on the middle column and the Collect Earth Mapathon on the right. And what you can see is that they agree to a considerable margin. A key difference here, though, between the data that I'm presenting here, which is this spatially explicit data, and the Collect Earth data is that there's a trade-off between spatial granularity and explicit local knowledge. So the landscape scale remotely sensed data considers every single location within the area of interest, while the Collect Earth Mapathons consider point subsamples. So they both align with each other as well as paint a slightly different picture, whereas the Collect Earth data can tell you point by point with local knowledge and considerable sort of human photo interpretation and looking over every single point can help you understand change, it can help you understand trends in the landscape. This data trades off some of that local knowledge and the individual point accuracy for being able to generate wall-to-wall landscape level data. So this is another reason why it's really important to have a high sampling density in your Collect Earth Mapathons so that we're able to ensure that those Collect Earth Mapathons are representative of the entirety of the landscape. Next slide, and thank you.
Great. Thank you, John. Next, we're going to move over to the panel discussion sessions. So I'd love to introduce you to the panelists. Please show your faces. We have Marie Duraisamy, who is a manager with the Sustainable Landscape Restoration Program here at WRI India. She conducts restoration opportunity assessments to support ecosystem services and livelihoods for local communities. We also have Christoph, who is a senior forestry officer in the Forest and Landscape Restoration Mechanism in the Forestry Division at FAO. We also have Dr. Parth Sarati Roy, who is our senior fellow with the Sustainable Landscapes Restoration Program at WRI India. He is an Earth observation, spatial ecology expert with a career that spans over 4 decades. And then we have Julian Fox, a team leader of forest monitoring at FAO, and he coordinates the task force for the monitoring in support of the UN Decade on Ecosystem Restoration. And I'll be moderating this session. I'm going to start off with a question that I think is on people's minds. Why do we need locally produced data for national or district planning? And how does it support monitoring in the UN Decade for Ecosystem Services? for restoration. I might hand it over to Marie first to hear from you, someone who hasn't spoken before yet. Can you share a little bit more about why we need locally produced data for national and district planning? Thanks.
Thanks, Dow. Good morning, good evening, everyone. As we enter the UN decade on ecosystem restoration, India is looking to fulfill its commitments towards a variety of landscape restoration targets. The Bond Challenge Commitment, the Paris Climate Agreement, as well as national targets for agroforestry and Green India Mission. Achieving these targets and commitments requires planning at subnational levels, which yield not only to restoration of land, but also to provisioning of multiple benefits to communities, especially in terms of income generation and livelihoods. The frameworks that are present for planning restoration at subnational levels require accurate, reliable, and accessible data. And as we did the assessment for restoration opportunity in CD district, we were able to combine biophysical and socioeconomic criteria to identify almost 360,000 hectares of restoration opportunity for about 8 different types of restoration interventions. In the spatial analysis part of it, we used global as well as local data sets and combined it with data that we collected using Mapathons. The Mapathon process in India was the first of its kind type that was done. It was participatory in the sense we had people from CD come in to participate in the Mapathon. These were farmers and youth with extensive local knowledge. They were paired up with students and young professionals who already knew Collect Earth and who had already worked on it before. And together they collected data on land use, the tree cover outside of forest areas, the existing patterns of trees on farmlands, that is the different types of agroforestry interventions that were already being practiced in the landscape. They looked at the tree species that were being used and also identified potential areas where more interventions can be done. This local knowledge definitely served us in developing the assessment further. And the assessment showed that restoration in CD can sequester about 7 million tons of carbon in the next 10 to 15 years. Importantly, on the livelihood side, generating value chains around 6 key tree species, which were identified by the participants during the Mapathon as native and popular species, could generate about 30,000 jobs in 5 to 7 years. And growing these trees, the process of growing trees also generates about 3.75 million days of employment and an additional USD 19 million in income. I will stop here and over to you again now.
Yeah, so very important to get local stakeholders involved as part of this data collection, just so that they can kind of see and participate and be involved in the decision-making eventually. Any additional comments, Julie and Christophe, on why we need locally produced data?
Thanks, Dal. Maybe I'll jump in. So yeah, I mean, creating locally relevant data is key. Creating your own information allows you to monitor your own restoration success and sometimes failure, and your own overall restoration progress. And this can enable effective and adaptive management and planning in a changing climate, as well as supporting quality, locally relevant data for reporting progress for the overall decade on ecosystem restoration, as we just heard. Quality, locally relevant data can also help unlock finance. Sound measurement and reporting of your restoration progress can help attract investments, and regularly reporting your progress can keep your investors happy and help you scale up your restoration actions. So as has been mentioned, we're developing the framework for ecosystem restoration monitoring in support of the UN Decade on Ecosystem Restoration. And we're doing this through a task force on monitoring, and we'd very much like to support the sort of local level data collection beautifully presented today, and I'll put in the chat an update on the activities of the task force. But maybe that's enough for the moment on the importance of local level data. Back to you, Dal.
Maybe over to you, Christophe, if I could maybe pitch another question for those who might not be aware. What is the UN Decade on Ecosystem Restoration?
Okay, now just to add on what was said by Bernard, yes, the UN Decade of Ecosystem Restoration is an initiative from the UN endorsed in late 2019. to be launched in June 2021 officially for 10 years. And the idea is to get a global movement on ecosystem restoration at scale globally, with the idea to also to build restoration generation. Okay. And all stakeholders, youth, local people taking care about the landscape for with the restoration efforts. Just to add for the importance of some data at the level, in addition with satellite data and maps as shown today with different presentation, it's also important to advertise success, and it's also important to showcase good practices at landscape level. So just let you know, Julian is leading the task force on monitoring in the context of this UN decade, and I am co-leading the task force on good practices with the idea to try to develop and to capitalize the existing knowledge and good practices to facilitate knowledge sharing. It's also important to have good information on costs and benefits of ecosystem restoration. And I just want also to highlight another initiative on local data. We are co-leading with a lot of people in WRI, IUCN, and other institutions, C4. This is the Economic of Ecosystem Restoration Initiative. We are trying to develop a framework, harmonized framework for data collection on cost and benefits to allow to build a huge and broad database in different ecosystems on cost and benefits of ecosystem restoration. I think it's key to convince investors to put money in restoration activity. Over to you.
Thank you, Christophe. Really important to not only think about biophysical locally produced data, but think about maybe social economic and other pieces of data that the country already may have, and be able to combine that and better track the progress of the work that we're doing in order to attract investors and continue and make sure that this movement is sustainable. Maybe over to you, Dr. Roy, to hear a little bit more about, based on your decades of experience in this space, what do you see as the uniquely different aspect about Collect Earth and how we're using Collect Earth to collect data? You might have to unmute yourself first.
Yeah. Thank you, Doc. I think basically what I see that Collect Earth provides the opportunity to collect the data from the ground level in the different sampling design and upscale it to regional landscapes. And while doing this, it collects information on biophysical parameters like land use, land cover, its change concept, the tree numbers, canopy size, and also the other biophysical environmental related information can be integrated. Now, these information, especially in land restoration, one of the important aspects is to collect a spatial data which is accurate and reliable and should be able to provide a monitoring mechanism. And that's where it integrates with the high resolution satellite remote sensing data, which is provides you a kind of a opportunity to restore. Lastly, the tool which makes it available is allows a creation of a database for analytic purposes, so that other applications like carbon stock monitoring and other the employment generation by the afforestation and the overall improvement in the environmental component by restoration process can be addressed. Thank you. I think I will stop here.
I'd also like to maybe invite Salalem, who's able to join us now. He wasn't able to present earlier. And so maybe the same question to you, if you can unmute yourself and turn on the camera to answer, with your experience working with teams as a lecturer, working with teams to collect the data, what have you seen and experienced and observed as uniquely different about Collect Earth and the way mapathons are held and organized to engage the participants?
Okay, thank you. You can hear me. Actually, we've been doing this. We've been using the collectors tool for the to monitor the restoration in different areas. In our case, we use this one in 4 landscape levels. And the thing that makes this tool different from others is we can refer back to what is happening earlier. That means in our case, for example, in the Sodoguragi case, we have conducted a baseline data for the year 2010, and then at the world level, they have been making an intervention or a restoration intervention. So to assess their impact, based on the GTP1 that in 2015. So we also collected data for the 2015. So this one is actually not possible if we are going to do the actual inventory, which is usually common. So I think this thing makes the collectors tool special than the other tools that we have been using before. Thank you.
Great, thanks for joining. Yeah, and maybe as a last question for all of you, anybody on the panel, I'd love to hear a little bit more about what your thoughts are for the future of Collect Earth. Where do you see this going? What are you excited to see?
Maybe Dao, I can jump in, but no, I'm really excited. I mean, FAO's Open Forest is 10 years old now, and these tools and platforms like Collect Earth are really mature. They've been used by over 30,000 people in just about all the countries of the world, but we will continue to innovate and improve them because there's just huge demand for them, as we've seen today. I'm really excited about combining, I think, the sample-based data with geospatial platforms like Sepal. We can create really nice geospatial products and maps to tell our restoration story to different restoration stakeholders. I mean, and I'm really excited some of the new data streams that are coming online, like the new high resolution monthly base maps from Norway for 64 countries. The monthly base maps provide a great resource for tracking restoration efforts month by month at a high resolution. And the task force on monitoring the overall UN decade. I think the examples that we heard today give us a great vision for how, sound data, local data can catalyze sort of science-based restoration monitoring. And I think we want to scale up what we've seen today through the coming years. And this collaboration, FAO-WRI, is a fantastic platform. So maybe that's enough excitement from my side. Back to you, Dao. Thank you, everybody.
Yeah, no, we're just as excited to scale this up. And, as Bernadette said earlier, how the importance of training and be able to train the trainers and see that scale. And I think Salalem is a perfect example of that. He's been able to work with his university and really train many more Ethiopian colleagues to be able to do this work. Maybe over to you, either Dr. Roy or Marie, to hear a little bit more about what you're excited about in the context of India.
Yeah, can I jump in here, Dow? I would like to make a very brief point. These few studies which have been demonstrated today, they have amply proved that the collector has a potential to provide you information and monitoring and create a database for baseline database period. Now, I would like to see that the WRI network over the globe can contribute in building the capacity among the people, especially in Southeast Asia and South Asia region, and so that it can be useful tool for collecting the information for monitoring the restoration process. Thank you.
Just adding on to Dr. Roy's point there. So one of the uniqueness and exciting part of Collect Earth is that it provides it facilitates participation of local communities in geospatial mapping and monitoring, which generally tends to be the domain of GIS and remote sensing experts. So this inclusiveness is a unique part of Collect Earth, and In the future, we want to design mapathons that include more women, that are more participatory in nature, so that you embed local communities in planning, implementation, and monitoring process entirely. Back to you, Dow.
Yeah, actually, I'd love to hear a little bit more about that. We didn't touch on it too much, but I think India in the case study in the guide actually talks a lot about this experience. Can you share a little bit more about how you included farmers in the process?
Absolutely. When we wanted to do the Collect Earth Mapathon, we knew that if we just get students and general GIS experts, they would not know enough about the landscape. And we knew we needed people from the landscape to interpret the land use, and especially on what is the potential for increasing tree-based interventions. Which is why we try to get farmers and especially youth from the landscape to participate in the process. One big learning or a challenge was that the infrastructure that is needed for conducting a Collect Earth process was not available in the landscape. So we had to conduct the Mapathon itself in the adjacent state, which meant that the people participating was limited. We generally had only men participate. For instance, women could not travel and they did not participate. So we missed out the voices of many people who are very key for restoration. But the participation of local communities was great, because now we have a small but very effective cadre that already knows about satellite imagery and who can be leveraged for setting up the indicators and monitoring system as and when we implement the restoration findings. So in the future, like I was saying, we're trying to innovate around finding decentralized ways of conducting the Mapathon, maybe through an app or any other process that can involve more people so that we get more ground level information upfront.
Anything to add on your end, Christophe or Julian, around examples you've seen from the FAO end of inclusiveness and participation from different groups of society?
Maybe just I would like to draw the attention of the participant on the fact that we have several flagship program or projects that are ongoing, where we really improve again and test or use those tools. I would like just maybe to mention one that is co-implemented by UNEP and UN Environment and IUCN. UN Environment is co-leading this UN Decade on Ecosystem Restoration with FAO. And IUCN is a key core partner and key partner on several restoration initiatives. And in the context of JEFs, we have the Restoration Initiative program, a big program with 10 countries on board, 11 national child projects, and where we can really also test and use all those tools at landscape level. I would like also to mention maybe the ongoing project starting in Africa, the INKI project led by GIZ as consortium leader, but with FAO-WRI, IUCN, WWF, Germany, World Bank, and a lot of key partners engaged in different countries in support to NEPAD and the IFR 100. So building on all those tools, we really need to help countries and regional initiatives to build on those tools, and in order to avoid to reinvent the wheel in each project or region. And we have now a very good basis and very good tools to support those initiatives.
Maybe just to compliment Christophe and flag to everybody that the official launch of the United Nations Decade on Ecosystem Restoration will be on World Environment Day, June 5th this year. And for everybody to support hashtag Generation Restoration. And from the monitoring side, we'll be launching several exciting products. And yeah, really, really exciting year, I think, for restoration, and a great webinar today. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, everyone. And I've been monitoring the chat also, the kind of emphasis on, with the COVID recovery to focus that on ecosystem restoration as part of the key kind of ways of building back better. I'd like to thank everybody for joining. As Christoph highlighted, this effort involves so many different organizations. We cannot do this without partners and folks who are implementing this work in the field and really producing and generating data locally. And I would like to encourage everyone to check out our blog that highlights all the key case studies and examples from this guide. Also download our guide. Take a look at these case studies that you've seen today, from El Salvador to Ethiopia to Rwanda to India, and reach out to either groups. Our email is here, restoration.monitoring@wri.org, and nfo-flrm@fao.org. Feel free to contact us for more information, and thank you everyone for joining us.
Bye.